Hi guys, I'm the Naval Guy, and today I'll be discussing the American battleship Iowa. The Iowa was the lead ship of her class and was far ahead of her time. The USS Iowa was laid down in June 1940 at the New York Naval Shipyard. She was launched on the 27th of August 1942, and she was then commissioned in February 1943. Her specifications as of 1943 were tonnage 45,000 tons, length 887.3 feet, width of 108.2 feet, draft of 37.2 feet. For propulsion, she had 8 Babcocks and Wilcock boilers. For 4 turbines that could produce 212,000 shaft horsepower. And these propulsion mechanisms could make Iowa go at the fast speed of 33 knots. And to help her achieve this speed, she had a very sleek hull design with a special bullnose bow design to have optimal results for speed. She had very good armor and armament for the time. For armor, her main belt had a thickness of 12.1 inches. Her turret bar beds had a thickness of 11.6 to 7.3 inches. Her turrets had a thickness of 19.5 inches. Her main deck having a thickness of 1.5 inches. And her secondary deck had the thickness of 6 inches. Her armament was arguably one of the best for its time. Her 9 main battery guns and triple turrets had a caliber of 16 inches. She had 25-inch guns in dual turrets for secondary guns. She had a ridiculous amount of anti-aircraft guns. She had 72 Bofors anti-aircraft guns in quad turrets, which had a caliber of 1.75 inches. And she also had 52 Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns in single mounts, which had a caliber of 0.79 inches. Iowa had also 2 Vought S2U float planes and 2 aircraft catapults for aviation facilities. So, when Iowa's service started on the 22nd of February 1943, she was immediately put down for a shakedown cruise off the coast of Virginia. In August, she was ordered to counter a possible threat, which was the German battleship Tirpitz in Norwegian waters. However, sadly, Iowa did not counter or meet this, so we never knew what would happen. She returned to the US in October for some maintenance checks. In November 1943, she carried the President of the United States at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and some other high-ranking military admirals and staff to Algeria to attend the Veteran Conference. On her way, an escorting destroyer accidentally fired a torpedo at Iowa, and Iowa was able to dodge the torpedo. The President was delighted to see that his crew were able to counter the threat. She completed the task to bring the President to Algeria on the 16th of December, and Roosevelt quoted that Iowa was a happy ship. The next year, in January 1944, she was going to be serving as the flagship of the 7th Battleship Division in the Pacific. In February, she sank the Japanese light cruiser Katori in the Pacific, and after this, she was part of the Fast Carrier Task Force TAFI-38 or TF-38. Under the command of General Wellesley, here she provided powerful bombardment for the Mariana Islands, and in March, she bombarded the Marshall Islands. In April, she provided artillery for the raids on the Wake Islands and other islands in the Pacific. From May to September, she protected carrier forces, and in October, she was nearly in the legendary battles of the Sibuyan Sea and Leyte Gulf, but missed it due to a deception tactic that the Japanese put up. She sailed near the Philippine coast and protecting carriers, but Typhoon Cobra struck the ships in late December 1944, and Iowa suffered damage to her propulsion shafts and her stern. She arrived in San Francisco for repairs on January 15, 1945, and was back in service in March 1945. From April to August 1945, she escorted carriers to attack Japanese naval bases in Okinawa, and on the 2nd of September, she was at Tokyo Bay for Japan's surrender, in which the Japanese surrendered on board her sister ship, the USS Missouri. Iowa left Tokyo Bay on the 20th of September for the United States, and after this she was participating in naval exercises and was put into the reserve fleet in March 1949. She was then brought back into service for the Korean War, in which she became the flagship under the command of Vice Admiral Robert Briscoe. In the Korean War, she bombarded and provided support along the coast of Korea, and the war ended in July 1953, in which she had many awards for her service. After the war, she participated in several naval exercises and was also put in training cruises until 1958. She was recommissioned in February 1958 and entered the reserve fleet at Philadelphia until the early 1980s. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan's administration reactivated the USS Iowa because of their plans to have a 600-ship navy. Iowa was removed from Philadelphia to the Avondale shipyard in Louisiana for modernization. In her modernization, she had all of her World War II anti-aircraft guns removed as they were very ineffective against modern fighter jets and missiles. And she also had the removal of 2 secondary turrets, and after this, Iowa was transferred to the Ingalls shipyard in Mississippi, in which she was fitted with the most modern weapons possible, such as Harpoon anti-ship missiles, box mounts of Tomahawk missiles, and a few Seavis Gatling guns. In addition to this, she received a helicopter deck for drones and helicopters. She was also equipped with the most modern radar available. Iowa was commissioned back into the fleet in April 1984 under the command of Captain Gerald Necco. From April to August 1984, she was under sea trials, and from September to April, she had a shakedown cruise in the Central Americas. In August 1985, she was part of the NATO naval exercises, and during this, she was serving in the Arctic Circle, in which she fired her weaponry in the Baltic Sea as a show of force, and operating with US and other allied ships. After she arrived in Le Havre, France, West Germany, Denmark, and Norway, she returned to the United States. In March 1986, after an inspection which Iowa failed, she couldn't meet the required speed specification of 33 knots, and at this time, her captain instructed that these issues were to be fixed. After this, she returned to the Central American region for naval exercises, and in July 1986, she was boarded by President Ronald Reagan and First Lady. In April 1987, Captain Larry Sequist assumed command and commanded the ship to naval exercises and gun support off the coast of Puerto Rico. From June to September 1987, she also did several naval exercises and training, and in December she became the first battleship to mount a helicopter on her flight deck. In November, she participated in rising Middle Eastern tensions, and Iowa, along with the U.S. fleet, were used as a show of supremacy and force in the area. And when she returned from the Persian Gulf on the 10th of March 1988 and survived the war, or the Gulf War, she survived. On the 19th of April 1989, a tragedy happened on board Iowa. Her turret number 2 blew up, killing 47 men. The US made an official investigation and confirmed it was accidental. Now, in the early 1990s, the Soviet Union fell and there was no threat. And since there was no threat, the US made some major budget cuts, and this meant no more Iowa in the Navy. As battleships were pretty obsolete by this time, and no other Navy had them. And Iowa was actually decommissioned pretty early due to the turret damage I mentioned earlier, and in 2001, she joined the reserve fleet. And I believe a few years after this, the turret damage was fixed. And since her sister ships were made into museum ships that are still around today, and after many efforts to save the ship, the US government allowed for Iowa to be made into a museum. The US Navy donated her to the Pacific Battleship Center in Los Angeles. And when she arrived, her dirty hull was cleaned and she was in for slight repairs. Finally, in June 2012, she permanently sits in the port of San Pedro, and on July 7th, 2012, she opened as a museum ship that still exists today. So, that does it for my USS Iowa video. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye!